Hello, and welcome to Planet and the People, episode 6 of series 2 of Planet and the People. Today I am saying hello to you from Battersea Park, which is a slight deviation. I've had to be in London this week, so I'm coming to you from the park where there are an incredibly irritating number of planes flying overhead, something I'm not used to contend with. But then, I suppose that's apt with the subject of this episode. So today I've decided to release 2 episodes back to back. Partly because they're both slightly shorter, and also I'm going to have to take a little hiatus next week. I'm not going to be able to release an episode next week, but we'll be back the following week. So 2 very different subject matters. One about a slightly lesser known semi-natural climate solution called biochar. But this first episode is all about the aviation industry. That big villain, the devil of climate change, with all those planes guzzling out carbon dioxide and destroying the planet. Well, I was quite surprised to learn in the first series just how low down the aviation industry and air travel is in terms of being the worst offenders when it comes to climate change. Below the fashion industry, below agriculture, below lots of things. But anyway, I decided to meet up with a friend of mine, Chip Yardley, real name Christopher. And when I say met up, I actually did meet up with him in that brief window of time late last year when we were able to. Now, Chip is a pilot who works for TUI, and I was surprised to learn that he is expected to have quite a lot of knowledge about climate change, and specifically the aviation industry's attitude towards climate change. So, I could ramble on as much as you like, but I won't. Instead, I will pass you back to my conversation with Chip Yardley. Hello, Chip.
Hello.
Hello, thank you very much for talking to me.
No worries.
Are you officially in Pilot World, Chip, or are you Christopher?
It's a mixture.
Good, well I don't have to call you Chris then, that was
No.
the thing, because I feel like that would be quite strange.
Yeah.
So, you are a pilot.
Yes.
You make your livelihood out of air travel. Mm-hmm. That is your livelihood, and you have had a rather quiet year.
Very.
As a result of that. I wanted to do an episode about air travel and the aviation industry for a while, and the other day you told me that when you had your job interview for TUI, you had to do quite a lot of swatting up about climate change and about sustainability, and that really surprised me. So, quickly, why did you have to swat up? What kind of things did they ask you?
Well, like every other industry, it's a big part of people's expectations now is that you know about climate change, you know what the industry is doing to cope with it, to progress. And so as part of the interview process, most airlines are asking a few questions about it now.
And what sort of questions did they ask? What did they want to know?
Just what the company is doing was the main thing that I was asked. They want to know that you know what the company is doing to combat climate change.
What were they doing? That's the question.
Yeah. Well,
this is TUI. This is unique to TUI, what they were doing. So
Yeah,
you can this is an opportunity to you to shout out about how great they are.
Yeah, well, at the moment, the main thing they're doing is offering carbon offsetting. And, it just offers the customers the ability to offset their holiday.
I was going to ask a bit about what the general attitude of the aviation industry is towards climate change. I'm going to ask that, regardless of COVID-19. So before COVID-19 happened, if the pandemic had never happened, what was the aviation industry's attitude towards climate change and air travel's impact on climate change?
Yeah, well, obviously all the statistics I bought today are from 2019.
Okay,
I thought
good, 'cause
it
that's
would be a bit disingenuous to give 2020's figures and say, look how amazing we are. But yeah, the main thing is there is a world organization called ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization.
Okay.
And they sort of make the rules of the road. The main agreement we've got at the moment is the CORSIA agreement, which is the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation. And yeah, that is the worldwide aviation industry is committing to carbon neutral growth from 2020 onwards.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically they've taken a snapshot of 2019's aviation carbon and they've said we're not going to grow at the expense of carbon from 2020 onwards.
Okay, so what does that involve?
Well, yeah, the main thing is carbon offsetting. There's three main parts of it.
Because a lot of people are a bit critical of carbon offsetting because it is sort of an excuse to carry on. So what's the industry doing while carbon offsetting? Because carbon offsetting is something you can do immediately, but in the meantime, building towards something more sustainable.
The two main things the industry is doing is efficiencies, aircraft fleet efficiencies, not just for newer, more efficient aircraft, which is a big part of it, but also just streamlining and making everything more efficient in terms of passenger numbers, making sure every plane is full. I mean, that's a huge thing. If you're flying about with just half full aircraft all the time, obviously that is double the amount of carbon per passenger than if you were full. That's down to each and every individual company, to be honest. And I mean, it's just a good business practice. If you take the sort of environmental out of it, it's just good business practices to have everything full. And I mean, these low-cost carriers like Ryanair and EasyJet have sort of actually led the way with that because they operate on this model where we need the planes full in order to make money. So that's a big part of it. And then the other part is fuels.
Yes, because that's the thing with any industry like this, innovation is quite key. So while you're carbon offsetting, how are you innovating your flights? So what's happening with fuels? Because you told me something quite interesting about that the other day. Yeah,
so biofuels are the main area that I think the industry is concentrating on at the moment. There is 8 different biofuels currently have been given the green light to be used in commercial aviation. I think only one is like the main one that's actually out there being used. And that's available in, I think, 5 airports currently around the world. Available permanently. I think other airports get it every now and then. They get it in little batches.
Are they big airports?
Yeah. So, I mean, LA is the main one, I think.
Oh, right. Okay.
Down Brisbane, Oslo, Stockholm, places like that. So they're big airports.
What's that biofuel made out of?
Well, yeah, the 8 are different ones. So I think the main one in use is an algae. So they grow an algae and they create biofuel from the algae.
Because that's the thing with biofuel. Yeah, I wanted to touch on biofuel because there are those issues of we use a lot of land for our food and for our animals' food, and that is a problem. So if we then start taking land to use for our fuel as well, that's going to contribute to the problem.
It, yeah.
Even though those crops are obviously sucking in carbon dioxide, it doesn't. There is a negative trade-off.
Yeah. Well, 2 of the other 8 that are currently in use are made from agricultural waste. As well.
Right. Okay.
So but again, it's very early days with that technology. They're not doing it on scale yet.
So is the idea of the biofuel is to ultimately, it's not going to be we're going to have swathes and swathes of field that are going to be designated purely for the creation of biofuel. Yeah, it is going to be waste. It's going to be other things. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully so. And the most recent ones that are extremely promising, in my opinion, is the CO2 capture.
Yes.
They have actually, literally, extremely recently created a new process of doing it with the CO2 capture, which goes straight from CO2 to jet fuel. I think the previous CO2 variants have been, they take CO2, they make it into a liquid of some other, I don't know, methane or something, and then they create jet fuel out of that. Okay. And now they've literally, within the last few months, created a process where it's CO2 directly to jet fuel.
So, how does it work from beginning to end? I mean, I know because I spoke to Climeworks in episode 3 of series 1, who is a direct air capture company that start this process. But for someone who doesn't know anything about this, carbon air capture fuel. How does it work?
Well, yeah, previously they take the carbon,
Out of the atmosphere.
Out of the atmosphere. They create, I think, ethanol out of it.
Okay.
And then they turn that ethanol then into jet fuel. The latest one is they use a catalyst, I think it's an iron-based catalyst, to somehow turn the CO2 directly into jet fuel, which is a much quicker process. It's, the process itself takes energy, so taking that step out obviously massively reduces the energy of the process. And the stuff they've released on it has basically said they're ready to go, but it's now the carbon capture technology that is lagging. They need this technology to be able to take huge amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere in order to turn it into jet fuel.
Yeah, would you describe that as a biofuel?
Yes. Yeah.
Would you describe that as a biofuel? Because I
Yeah.
thought that biofuels is simply from crops, essentially.
Well,
But,
the industry's calling it a biofuel.
Okay.
And yeah.
so when we talk about biofuels, it's not all necessarily from crops or from
I think
agriculture.
biofuel is just a fuel that doesn't release any CO2 into the atmosphere. Well, it does, but it takes out that CO2 in the creation
it's a
of
neutral
it. So,
cycle.
yeah, it's a neutral cycle. It's a sort of closed circle.
And how prevalent is that? Because I know that Climeworks she described their industry as not being quite climate relevant yet, to use that phrase. But they are scaling up, and they've had a massive scale up in the last 10 years from literally milligrams to... Can't remember the exact amount, but a lot of tons.
Yeah.
That could be millions, that could be trillions. I don't want to put a statement on that. Listen to episode 3, you'll find out the figures there. So how far off do you think the aviation industry is from using carbon capture biofuel as its predominant fuel?
It was certainly decades.
Oh, decades.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because the article that I was reading on it said they're now depending on the limiting factor for them is this carbon capture technology. So they can't physically get enough carbon from the atmosphere. So that technology of actually taking the carbon out of the atmosphere needs to catch up with this latest
okay.
biofuel.
So it's got, as soon as that's ready, it's like, right, bring it on.
I think so.
essentially.
I think then they'll be able to scale that pretty quickly.
Okay, and that's quite exciting because those carbon capture plants are sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and they are locking a lot of it underground as well. So essentially they're providing a business opportunity for that technology, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, and cost-wise as well, it's very promising because it's quite a... they've said, obviously, this is incredibly early days for all of this, so a lot of it is sort of speculation. But they've said they think they can produce it on a cost basis of what jet fuel is now. So if they can do that, then it's incredible because obviously people who don't care about the climate at all, if it's cost for cost the same as jet fuel, why wouldn't they?
You might as well.
So or even cheaper. Then people who are just purely businessmen don't care about the climate at all are still going to invest in it because it's cheaper. So it just makes complete sense.
Yeah. Outside of biofuels, where are things with general innovation? You were talking about efficiency, hybrid planes,
Yeah.
electric planes.
Yeah, electric and hydrogen are the two main ones that the industry is looking at. The first electric commercial plane, I think, had a flight a few years ago. It was very small.
I know that there's been an electric plane in the air, but an actual commercial one.
Yes, but not what you think. No. I think there's a company in America that do little sightseeing trips.
Oh, okay.
In a little aircraft. So it's just a small one. I think they did their first flight with it back in 2017 or 18.
Okay.
I think, but electric, and again, just my opinion, I don't think electric will take off because unless they really improve the technology of batteries, because they're just so heavy, and that's obviously the main enemy for someone trying to get in the air is weight. But just the other month, Airbus released, I think, 3 concept designs for hydrogen-powered aircraft.
Okay.
That they say, with enough interest, they could have ready by 2035.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does a hydrogen plane work?
Well, the main concept is whether to store the hydrogen in liquid form or gas form.
Okay.
because I think liquid hydrogen actually has about 3 times the power that jet fuel has, like pound for pound. It's
Right.
really explosive stuff, but of course that comes with its own dangers of how to store it. Jet fuel at the moment, the really amazing thing about it is when it's just in liquid form, it's not actually flammable. You know, you could stand in a puddle of it and throw a match in it, and it wouldn't light.
Really?
It's only
Not even the fumes?
no. It's only when it's it's put into atmosphere, it's sprayed, that it becomes sort of flammable.
Oh, okay.
So that's great in terms of if there's any incidents when like you get a fuel leak and stuff. It's quite safe. In terms of hydrogen, obviously liquid hydrogen, if that was to leak, you know, if there's a spark, anywhere, you've got a real problem. And the same with gas as well.
Where do you get the hydrogen from?
Well,
Just take it from water? Am I showing my lack of scientific knowledge here?
Well, water, and it's in the atmosphere as well.
Okay.
That comes with its own problems because, of course, hydrogen creation is currently puts a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. I think it's not far off.
Does it?
The aviation industry in total creating, yeah. So for hydrogen-powered aircraft to take hold, you need to also figure out a way of getting green hydrogen.
Okay.
Which is a big industry at the moment. They're putting a lot of money into that, trying to figure out how to do it. But yeah, we need to, for that to be a decent concept, you need to figure out green hydrogen.
Never really considered how you get. I just think of hydrogen as water, and then taking something out of that. And
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but I've never really considered that being an emitter itself. And do you think that's likely? That they'll be able to figure out a way of creating green hydrogen?
Yeah, it would be great. And from a tech point of view for the aviation industry, if you figure out a green hydrogen source, you don't actually have to. Our current jet engines, you wouldn't actually have to modify them, that much to get them to run on hydrogen and stuff. So hydrogen-powered aircraft would be quite easy to sort of make and just go with.
Is there any emission impact from the hydrogen itself?
What, from burning it?
From burning it?
No,
yeah.
I think it just makes water, doesn't it?
Okay.
I think you burn hydrogen,
vapor.
just water vapor comes out the back.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's just the sort of basic day-to-day stuff, which is making our current aircraft as efficient as possible. And they're doing that. I mean, jet engines, I think they've pushed them almost as far as they can go in terms of making them as efficient as possible. They're actually about 80% more efficient now than they were in the 60s.
80%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but then they're making the airframes lighter as well. The 787's a lot of carbon in it to make it a lot lighter. Stuff like wing design to reduce drag is a huge part of it now.
When you say, could you make those carbon fibres out of captured carbon, do you think?
Ooh, I have no idea. That would be nice.
You can. Not, I don't know about the planes, but you can use captured carbon to create physical things. That would be good.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, that's detracting.
Yeah.
That's another conversation. Question about global emissions in general. What is air travel responsible for? What percentage
about
is it?
2.5%.
2.5%?
Yeah.
I thought it was 5.
No, I think, I've got my figures from the Climate Change Committee.
Okay.
Again, if you look at different places, they give slightly different figures. But yeah, the Climate Change Committee gives 2.5%. It's 7% of UK.
7% of the
Yeah.
UK emissions.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2.5 globally, 7% of the UK, so
yeah.
it varies. That's quite impressive. I mean, considering previous guests have told me around 4%, 5%, and considering how much of a villain the aviation industry is considered in climate change, it is a lot less compared to energy, compared to agriculture, compared to car travel, etc., etc. So is that all air travel, including imports, exports?
Yes, that's all CO2 put into the atmosphere by
from
the
planes.
aviation. Yes.
Right. And what percentage of that is imports, exports, business travel, tourism?
So it's hard to put a complete figure on that, but 15% is freight and cargo. So I think you could probably say that's import, exports, and then 85% is obviously passengers. They think only 12% of that 85% is business.
12% is business?
Yes.
Okay.
Which
So the vast majority of it is tourism?
is tourism, people travelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting, because I always just assumed that a lot of people who travel for business travel every week. Or even every day in some cases.
Yeah.
So it is quite a small percentage that makes up business travel.
Yeah, but to be honest, I was quite surprised by that. When I found it, I thought that was far lower than I expected.
I thought it was going to be the other way around.
Yeah, no, so did I. But yeah, that's what I found.
So on that front, business travel do you think business travel might change now?
Well, they've all the airlines are obviously doing a lot of research into this as to what aviation might look like post-pandemic. And a lot of the stuff that I've read indicates that they think business travel might be gone for good. Or certainly not recover. They'll always
not
be,
in the same scale anyway.
Yeah, no, because of course, like, why would you? Like, if you've got Skype and Teams and all these amazing online apps that you can have a business meeting for, why would you send someone halfway across the globe and not just pay for travel, but pay for hotels, food and everything, just to have a face-to-face? So yeah, they don't think that's going to recover particularly quickly, and possibly never to the pre-pandemic levels. But they do think tourism should recover.
Yeah. Oh, hybrid planes, where they have a combination of engine, combustion and electric.
Yeah.
Do they exist at the moment?
They do exist. Airbus have a concept that they flew last year. It had 3 normal jet engines and 1 electric fan engine, and it was purely a proof of concept, and that could get some traction, because the thing with aviation is we burn the most fuel just getting off the ground. That's where it's really inefficient, is firing along the runway, getting up to our cruise altitude. Once we're at the cruise altitude, everything's on idle. Yeah, it's very easy. You don't need much to just stay there. And then of course in the descent and landing, we hardly burn any fuel at all. So I think with these sort of hybrid models that Airbus is playing around with at the moment, you could take off on your jet engines, get up to your cruise altitude, and then wind them right back, and the electrics can just take over and power you along for the cruise.
Oh, okay.
And stuff, because that's where you don't need much thrust at all. And I think that's where the battery-powered planes are having a problem, because they use so much of their energy
to actually get up.
Yeah, and then once they're up there, they haven't got any power left.
So you could have a much smaller battery for these hybrid planes, because they're just...
Yeah. And then, of course, if you do run out of battery, you've got these jet engines that you could just fire up and carry on.
Yeah. You're not going to crash.
Yeah.
So do you think that is a potential opportunity in the near future, that hybrid planes are going to start becoming... Because you say they're only in sort of concept level now.
Yes, yeah,
prototypes.
And Airbus did actually... Now, I don't know what this means for the future, but Airbus actually cancelled that last, mid-2020. It was a partnership between Airbus and Rolls-Royce, and they've said they've taken that as far as they want to for now. So I don't know if that means that they did some testing and they were like, oh, no, this isn't going to work.
Okay.
Or it's just the fact that everyone's a bit cash poor right now because of the pandemic, and they haven't got the money to really pump money into innovations like this.
All right, well, do you have anything more you'd like to add?
Pack light.
Yeah, right, okay.
Actually, it does make a huge difference.
Does it?
Yeah,
does
massive.
It actually make a big difference?
Yeah, massive. And there's a few airlines that have been trying to encourage their passengers to pack light, because for every gram you save on your luggage, you're saving bits of aviation fuel that don't have to be burned and put in the atmosphere.
Are there any airlines that you would say are doing better than others in terms of reducing emissions and actually trying to make a real difference?
I think in the UK we're doing exceptionally well, and that's actually been driven a lot by the consumer. I think by people starting to care more, because again, this all goes back to the carbon offsetting, which is the main thing we're doing at the moment. But the companies are starting to realise that people won't fly unless there's a carbon offsetting option.
Okay.
Certainly in countries like Scandinavia, they started carbon offsetting about 5-6 years ago now, because they realised that people were not flying because they were so concerned about the carbon they were putting in the atmosphere.
Okay.
And that's really starting to kick off in the UK now. Companies like EasyJet are carbon offsetting all their tickets as standard now.
Yes.
So that's fantastic. I think the UK we're doing very well. And I think it's very exciting, all of this new technology that's coming in at the moment that could really drastically reduce the amount of carbon that the aviation industry puts in.
That's what I was going to ask. How optimistic do you feel? That sounds like
I feel
do.
very, very optimistic. Yeah, especially, I mean, the most exciting for me are these biofuels. I think that is really, really exciting, because if we can create biofuel that's as cheap, if not cheaper, than jet fuel, then everyone will adopt it.
I'm glad you were able to clarify with me the definition of biofuel, because I always thought that those carbon capture synthetic fuels, I was like, why is no one talking about that? Why are all they talking about is biofuel, which uses crops? So thank you very much for clarifying that. That's clarified a lot in my head. Well, thank you very much, Chip. And when are you expecting to get back to work?
Well, May 17th is the current date. We're allowed to go flying again, and I'm expecting to be back, hopefully full-time, sort of June, July.
That was Chip Yardley. I seem to have timed it perfectly now that just as I click record, there seems to be a plane looming ahead, and honestly, it's something like every 5 minutes a plane comes over, which you probably wouldn't notice unless you were doing some kind of audio recording, but it's very annoying, and it really does put that whole 2%/7% statistic into question, but I'm going to believe it. So hopefully you feel a little bit more up to speed about air travel and the aviation industry and what it's doing. If you'd like to hear a little bit more about that direct air capture technology that Chip was talking about, that is converted into a renewable biofuel, then do go back and listen to episode 3 of series 1. As I mentioned a few times, my conversation with Climeworks. Climeworks are a pioneer in that technology, so I would strongly recommend going back and having a listen to that. So my next episode is all about biochar, which is a slightly obscure climate solution that I had never heard of before, but I will leave it up to the next episode to introduce that. In the meantime, do please click subscribe if you would like. There's another plane, and you've enjoyed this episode and would like to listen to more. And I'm on social media at Planet and the People on Instagram and Twitter, and at Planet and the P on Twitter. I'm trying to rush through this before the plane gets deafening, but I will be back in 2 minutes. Goodbye.